How taxes shape empires, jizya, land levies, and the economics of control. In the clamor of ancient empires, the hum of marketplaces, the rustle of caravan tents, the pulse of conquest, one force quietly shaped the world: taxation. Not just a whisper in the ledger, but an instrument of power, identity, and empire. Today, we'll journey through three pillars of fiscal control: jizya, the tax on non-Muslims; land levies, the empire's agrarian backbone; and the broader economics of dominance. Through their interplay, we glimpse how states turned revenue into authority. The jizya was not merely a tax, it was a contract. Levied on non-Muslims, it granted them protection, religious freedom, and exemption from military service. In theory, it was proportional to one's means, structured with tiers: the wealthy, the middling, and the poor. Caliph Umar ibn al-Khattāb exemplified mercy in his implementation, charging 4 dirhams for the rich, 2 for the middle class, and 1 for the working poor. The system was adaptable, sometimes even paid in kind, with cattle or tools, so long as it avoided unclean or forbidden goods. Across centuries, the jizya evolved. The Abbasids integrated it into elaborate budgets, ensuring courts and scholars could flourish. In the Ottoman Empire, it was bureaucratized, organized into tiers, and even waived for those who served the state in special roles, guarding passes or securing roads. In India, Akbar abolished the jizya in the name of universal peace, weaving Hindus and Muslims more closely into his vision of a united realm. His great-grandson Aurangzeb reinstated it, sparking division and resentment. Again and again, the jizya revealed itself as more than revenue. It was a barometer of tolerance, identity, and rule. If the jizya marked identity, the land tax spelled control. Known as kharaj, the land levy became the empire's agrarian engine. It was calculated with care. Land quality, irrigation, and crop type all influenced the rate. This was no blunt instrument, but a tool of fine measurement. Rulers reshaped it to tighten their grip. In the Delhi Sultanate, Alauddin Khalji demanded up to half the produce from cultivators, 50%, the legal maximum under Islamic law. It filled the state's granaries, but bred resentment in the fields. Under the Mughals, Akbar's minister Raja Todar introduced the Tahasila system, surveying land and standardizing revenue so peasants knew what to expect and the state knew what to collect. With each reform, the land tax became more than a toll on soil. It became the empire's heartbeat. When these two systems converged, jizya and land levies, the result was the architecture of empire. Revenue from jizya filled treasuries. Land taxes fueled armies, fortresses, and palaces. They underwrote roads, irrigation, and grandeur, but also stratified societies. Non-Muslims under jizya often bore the mark of second-class status. Farmers under heavy levies bent beneath the burden. And yet, wise rulers could wield taxation as a bridge. Akbar's reforms bound his realm together. Aurangzeb's decisions fractured it. Again and again, taxation was more than money. It was leverage, a signal of inclusion or exclusion, mercy or domination. Across centuries and continents, these fiscal tools were the lifeblood of empire. They shaped identities, structured societies, and determined destinies. And when we trace the flow of taxes, from the pole of submission to the share of soil, we see not just numbers, but the outlines of power itself. For in the ledgers of empire, in the grain that was seized and the coins that were weighed, history itself was being written. In the great sweep of history, empires rise and fall with the clash of armies, the vision of rulers, the faith of their peoples. But beneath the banners and battles lies another story, a quieter force that bound subjects to sovereigns, peasants to palaces, and faith to rule. That force was taxation, not merely coins in a treasury, but the lifeblood of power. It financed armies, paid for monumental architecture, sustained scholars and courts, and, perhaps most importantly, defined the relationship between ruler and ruled. To study an empire's taxes is to study its very soul. Among the most famous of these taxes was the Jizya. At first glance, it appears simple, a levy on non-Muslims living under Muslim rule. But its meaning ran deeper. It was both a burden and a bargain. In exchange for this tax, non-Muslims were granted security, freedom of worship, and exemption from military service. In theory, it was tailored to one's capacity to pay, the wealthy giving more, the poor giving less, and the destitute often excused entirely. Early caliphs framed it as an act of justice. Umar ibn al-Khattāb is said to have reduced the tax for the poor and elderly, even drawing from the state treasury to provide for those unable to pay. In these early centuries, the jizya could be as little as a few coins, or as practical as livestock, grain, or tools. It was flexible, even humane, at least in principle. But as empires grew, the jizya became a symbol as much as a source of revenue. Under the Abbasids, it was systematized, woven into the empire's vast bureaucracy. Registers listed names, amounts, and obligations, transforming what had once been negotiated locally into a machinery of state. In the Ottoman Empire, the tax was further refined, categorized by wealth and status, and sometimes waived for those who rendered services, messengers, guards, or artisans vital to imperial needs. Yet its meaning shifted with politics. In India, Emperor Akbar abolished the jizya altogether in 1564, declaring that all subjects, Hindu or Muslim, should share equally in his vision of universal peace. For a time, this act softened divisions and helped knit his vast, diverse empire together. But a century later, Aurangzeb reinstated the jizya, seeing it as both a religious duty and a tool of discipline. To many Hindus, this was not only a financial burden, but a sign of exclusion. The echoes of this decision still shape how his reign is remembered. If the jizya revealed how rulers marked religious difference, the land tax, the kharaj, showed how they commanded the soil itself. In agrarian empires, it was the backbone of state revenue. Unlike the jizya, the land tax was calculated with painstaking detail. Fields were surveyed, their fertility assessed, their irrigation measured. Rates shifted depending on whether crops grew by rainfall or canal, whether land was fallow or rich. It was not one tax, but a system of systems, adjusted to local conditions. In the Delhi Sultanate, Alauddin Khalji took this to extremes. He imposed taxes that could reach up to half the harvest, the maximum allowed in Islamic law. The state grew wealthy, but cultivators groaned under the weight. Grain poured into royal storehouses, but resentment simmered in the villages. By contrast, Akbar's finance minister, Raja Todar-Mal, sought balance. His famous Dasala system surveyed vast stretches of land, recording average yields over 10 years to create a stable rate. Peasants knew what to expect, the state knew what to collect, and the system reduced corruption. It was taxation as governance, not mere extraction. But taxation was never neutral. It bound people to the state, but also exposed the fault lines of power. Heavy levies could spark rebellion, as farmers abandoned their fields or fled into forests. Fairer systems could legitimize rule, drawing subjects into a shared political order. The balance was always precarious. When we set the jizya and land levies side by side, we see more than financial systems. We see the architecture of empire. Jizya defined religious belonging, marking insiders and outsiders. Land tax defined economic obligation, binding peasants and elites alike to the throne. Together, they created layers of identity and hierarchy. Who paid, how much, and to whom. And they shaped history. The Abbasids flourished by perfecting tax administration, but when revenues declined, their grip weakened. The Mughals expanded by reforming land taxes, but under Aurangzeb, fiscal strain and social fracture accelerated decline. The Ottomans maintained power for centuries through disciplined taxation, yet as revenues fell behind military costs, their empire faltered. Even beyond Islamic empires, the pattern holds. The Roman tributum, the Byzantine chrysagion, the Chinese grain levies, all reveal that control of taxation was control of empire. For money was never just money, it was authority, legitimacy, and survival. And so we return to the deeper truth. Taxation was never only about revenue, it was about power, shaping who belonged and who did not, who thrived and who struggled, who carried the empire on their shoulders and who reaped its rewards. In the end, coins and grain may seem mundane compared to battles and monuments, but in their weight, we find the heartbeat of empires. For in every tax assessed, in every harvest measured, and every coin stamped with a ruler's seal, we glimpse the hidden scaffolding of history, the economics of control.